is time for you guys to enjoy yet another sleepless session. So tell me if you're ready, and we'll have ourselves a blast. Now tonight, we're going to help ourselves enjoy an all-new Sleepless Friday. So get yourselves ready to relax, because we're about to do this the same way we did last time. First, I'm going to find a creepy story for you all. And I hope that the sounds of my fireplace and the thunder outside will not be too loud, so that you can truly enjoy the whispers. Let's start with a story called "My Father Punished Me When I Talked to Ghosts." I think it sounds like a fairly creepy one, and then I will tell you about some ritual creepypastas, the creepiest of them all. They will probably make you very afraid. Let me see, where are the ritual pastas? There they are. I found them all. Good. My rating, highest ratings. Good. Okay. Now the first story for tonight is "My Father Punished Me When I Talked to Ghosts" by Edwin Crow. Are you ready? Let's do this. I've been blind since birth, and as I grew up, everything was described to me in such vivid detail that I didn't realize why it was that important to see, especially having no reference point to compare it. We lived in a single-floor ranch house. That's what my father told me. In my mind, of course, I could see, although unlike how a sighted person could, I had spatial awareness. I knew where my bedroom was, where the bathroom, living room, and kitchen were. Each wall had its own texture. I don't know if that was done on purpose, or if I could feel things others never noticed. But I rarely fell over. Only if father, or one of the visitors, put something where they shouldn't have. It was usually the visitors, and father would shout. They visited infrequently, and only briefly when they did. Father said I shouldn't speak to them, that it unsettled him. He'd worry when I saw something that he didn't, saw it with my ears or by touch. Ellie was the first. She seemed very sweet. Oh, give me a moment. Apologies, I had to set a little something up. Ellie was the first. She seemed very sweet. She asked my name and why my face was so messed up. She was in the living room. I could hear where she sat from her breath. Harsh nasal sounds as if her nose was blocked. When father had a cold, he'd always breathe through his mouth. Big labored breaths, as he wasn't used to it. When people mentioned my face, I always touched it, trying to work out why it was so strange to them. When I asked if I could touch theirs, there was always a pause. I guessed sighted people never did that. Why would they need to? When I asked Ellie if I could touch her face, she reluctantly agreed, but a moment later, father entered the room and asked me who I was speaking to. I told him, nobody. He would always punish me when I spoke about them. I think it scared him. You know, he'd take my arm and march me off. I'd be knocked off balance and disoriented to the point where he finally set me free. My hands would frantically search my surroundings until I knew where I was. It was usually my bedroom, though every now now and then he'd leave me outside in the middle of nowhere. That was the worst. I'd be lost and scared. He told me about the road that ran in front of the house and explained that the sounds I heard were cars, that they'd kill me if they touched me. Those sounds were my only means of recognizing my surroundings. I waited until I heard one, and then knew which way to run back to the house. I heard Ellie that evening. She whispered to me, saying she was scared. I whispered back, but she didn't hear. I asked Father about Ellie. He didn't want to talk about her. I asked him why. I asked him again, why? He didn't reply. When I told him that she asked about my face, he asked how I responded. I told him I wanted to touch hers. He laughed, though I knew he wasn't happy. No. I could hear the difference. When you laugh for pleasure, your mouth is wide open. When you pretend, your mouth is almost closed. To me, the difference is obvious. It wasn't until I was older that he explained. He said we lived in a special place, connected to the other world, that sometimes dead people would slip through, people who died in pain and wanted to reach the living. He explained that because I couldn't see, I was able to tune into that they knew I was listening when others weren't. He said I had to ignore it, otherwise he told me they'd latch on and never leave me. All the dead want is to be able to be alive again, he said. It was dangerous, and they would trick me. He said he knew how to deal with them, but he couldn't help if they became attached to me. Alex appeared to me a few years later. She told me she was lost and didn't know where she was. I told her I wasn't allowed to speak to her. Still, she pleaded for help. I kept quiet, knowing what would happen if I said anything. Did you speak with them? Father asked. Though I was upset, I told him no. I wished I could help her. I knew what it was like to be lost, and it scared me. Alex didn't whisper to me at all, no. I'd ignore her, and she ignored me. Father saved me, and I was thankful. After Alex, I knew what I needed to do, so I did it. The spirit stopped bothering me after that, for a very long time. That was until Sarah appeared. Sarah didn't give me a chance to be quiet. I was on my own, sitting in the living room and listening to the television. Help, she said. I need to find a way out. I stayed silent. You can hear me, can't you? She asked, surprised. I'm not allowed to speak with you, I told her. Please, she begged. I'm scared, I'm lost. I want to see my daddy. I gripped the arms of the chair and told her I wasn't allowed. He's dead, she said. I didn't answer. Your father is dead, she said again. I wasn't going to fall for it. I heard banging from around the room as things began to fly and the shelves began to shake. Stop it, I shouted, and it did. Please help me leave, she said. I wasn't going to talk to her. I did the only thing I thought would help. I unlocked the front door, hoping she'd run out and get lost, just like I would do. When I heard from her no more, I locked the door and sat back down. I listened intently for any signs that she was still there, except for the sounds of the TV. It was silent. I hated when my heart raced. I became all too aware of the tick-tock feeling of the rise and fall within my chest, like it was about to explode. When I heard my father's voice, I screamed. Son, he said, I need your help. I think I'm dying. I did what he told me to do. I didn't speak. If he did die, he'd never leave me. Instead, I raced out into the open air and shouted for help. I shouted until my voice was hoarse. I heard the sounds of cars racing along the road in front of my house. I shouted until I heard someone respond. It was a woman. What's wrong? They asked. I told them I think my father was dying. They asked what had happened to my face. I pleaded with them to help me, and they promised that they would. I sat down on the grass later and waited. Sometime later, the woman returned to me and asked if she could hold my hand. I'm so sorry, she told me. I heard the sounds of sirens and of people rushing. I asked what was going on. The woman said she was there for me. As the noise died down, a man asked asked me a question. I'm a paramedic, he said. What happened to your face? I told him I was fine. I asked if I was sure, and I told him I was. He asked if I minded him touching my face. I said it was okay. A moment later, I felt a pressure release from around my forehead, and the air felt cold against my skin. It sounded as if he were peeling an orange. I imagined that in my head and worried he exposed my insides. I screamed and asked him what he was doing. He told me everything was going to be okay, and the woman squeezed my hand, telling me to be brave. I didn't know what it was I was experiencing. I felt a tight pain within my head, like when you smash your shin against something hard, followed by something I'd come to understand as pride. It hurt so much, I began to cry. What happened to your eyes? The paramedic asked. I said I was blind. He asked to check them. The pain returned when he examined them. Do you know him? The man asked the woman who had helped me. She told him that I had been screaming for help and that she'd come to my aid, but she'd never met me before. How long have you had your eye injury? He asked me. I told him I'd been blind from birth. He asked me if I could see his fingers. I told him no. He asked if I could open my eyes. I said I didn't know what he meant. He asked if he could open them for me. I didn't respond. Then I felt his fingers on my face, fingers covered in something rubbery. Suddenly, it became bright again. I screamed. He tried to calm me. The woman squeezed my hand again. I didn't know what was happening. Things I couldn't describe came to me. It was like it always was, but multiplied 100-fold and so much more real. I carried on screaming as a fuzzy form came into view. Just breathe, okay? The paramedic said. Everything will be fine. When was the last time you saw? As my heart began to calm and my breathing slowed, I became distracted by what I was experiencing. It overwhelmed me. I wanted to cry, and I did. How long has it been? He asked again. I've never seen anything before, I told him. I was told to keep on an eye mask for most of the day, only taking it off at night at first to allow my eyes time to adjust. At the same time, I was placed in the custody of my aunt and uncle, and didn't even know it at first. They were shocked at what happened to me and that I never even attended school. The past few years have been a roller coaster ride. The doctor said I may never have perfect vision, though what little I have is God sent, and I'll take what I can get. I've only recently been learning to read and write, so I apologize if my English isn't the greatest. It's the best I can do. I've been asking my aunt what happened to my father, but all she says is that he died of a heart attack. I asked what sort of man he was. She says he was a brother and she'll love him no matter what. My uncle doesn't want to talk about him at all. I've been using the computer a lot recently and really enjoying the internet. I can't believe such a thing exists. After being lonely for so long, I can talk to whomever I want, when I want, though I'm wary of that. After all, how do I know if who I'm speaking to is alive? No one seems to share my father's concerns about that. Today I was on a forum discussing the spirit world. I was so happy to find people who I could relate to, and someone curious about my username sent me a link to an article on a true crime website. It was about my father, and mentioned me by name. They asked who I was and if I was the same person. According to the article, my mother had gone missing soon after my birth. It said I'd been bound so that I couldn't see, that my father always wanted a daughter. They found 14 bodies in the basement. They said one got away. A girl by the name of Sarah Frank. She was the one to call the police. They found father's car parked around the back of the house. They supposed he was carrying his victims into the basement via the storm entrance and left them there. Sarah managed to get away after she agreed to be his daughter. Following 4 days of sustained torture, she stabbed him with a knife he'd placed on the counter to button some toast. I didn't want to believe it, and I'm not sure if I would have, if it weren't for the names of the victims, 2 of which stuck out, Ellie Farmer and Alex Riddle. I'd spoken to them both in the living room. That is they. I wonder if my father had been honest with me about a single thing in his life. Throughout it all, one question remains above all others. Did I speak to Ellie and Alex before or after he killed them? Ladies and gents, that is a fucking creepy story. Oh, those are the ones that give me the shivers. Oh, can't stand it. I'm going to bring you even more stories soon. So please look forward to it, because This one is about the internet, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Let me get some water, and we'll resume the creepiness. Alright. I hope that wasn't too long a wait. Now, this story was written by Jared Roberts. It's called The Hidden Web Page, and I think you'll like it. Alright, let's get started. Sometimes I find it hard to believe that I've been an internet user for 20 years now. That's older than some of my co-workers. It's over half my life, and still the internet feels like the new thing. I used to take it for granted, we all do. But at least I remember what it was like when it wasn't there. When you had to leaf through an encyclopedia to find an answer. When you could only find Gilly Anderson's picture in magazines. Or later when songs took 30 minutes to download and full-length movies were almost impossible to find because no one's hard drive could hold them. First getting online was super exciting. I mean, the first time I did it without supervision. Because I knew I had anything at my fingertips. I could type in good old Lycos, one of many pre-Google search engines. And there it would be. I was interested in naked celebrities and the paranormal back then. I was only 13. Give me a break. I was so interested in the paranormal, I built a Fortune City free homepage all about the occult and the X-Files. I linked it to the Darknet web ring, where all the best Darknet websites and homepages came together. Pages on spellbooks, goth babes, the occult, dark art, and a gross-out page or two. It was through the web ring that I met Angelica. Angelica hosted a Wiccan GeoCities or tripod homepage that I found particularly alluring. No wait, it was Angel Fire, that's right. She just made some of the best cool animated GIFs, meaties, and frames. Amazing stuff at the time. Just like her, the page was creative and attractive, but also simple. The reason I bring up all this is that she suddenly contacted me just a few weeks ago by email, asking what's been happening. A catch-up question. We had almost 20 years of catching up to do, and this is pure Angelica. She signed the email with ICQ contact. #. I enjoyed the quaint touch. It'd be like someone in the 90s sending a letter with a wax seal. No. I replied back with a summary of how my life had gone over the last 18 years or so, since I'd last communicated with her. 18 years makes you think. She shot back a response almost immediately asking for details. We exchanged a few emails this way. I was pretty excited to come home from work and write to her, actually. Nothing romantic, it was reconnecting with my past. A strange but addictive feeling. Soon I started to notice that something was a little off. She never really answered anything about herself, no. She ignored my suggestions that we text or talk on the phone. All she wanted was to know more about me. It got me wondering, like maybe she's dying and just doesn't want to say so. So I asked her why she wasn't sharing, and if there was something I should know. I started reading over her previous messages for clues, and I noticed something that didn't occur to me then. Her email address was at globetrotter.net. That may not mean anything to you, but it struck me as strange. You see, Globetrotter was a Canadian ISP way back in the mid-90s. I didn't even realize that they still hosted. I know a lot of people still have their old email addresses for sentimental value and all that, but it was like she was purposely trying to be old school. Something about it creeped me out, like she was trying too hard to make me feel nostalgic or something. Again, I didn't have to wait long for a reply. She didn't answer my questions. She asked me, "Hey, do you remember the hole?" I don't know why then, but the moment I read that sentence, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. websites, news groups, web rings, all the old internet stuff, but came up empty. She sent me another email before I could reply. You really don't remember? The hole was our little secret. Not many knew about it. Even fewer knew how to find it. But we found it. It was right there all along. Sometimes when you load Darknet in Netscape, there'd be a tiny black dot in the bottom left corner. In all this blank space, you had to hover over it exactly and click it, and then you'd be there. You'd be in the hole. You remember it now, don't you? She was right, I did. I just didn't remember ever calling it the hole. No, what I remembered was a secret little space we found. I remember it was like the browser didn't see it as a real website or something. There wasn't even an address to copy and post and paste from the bar. It was just the letter M. I tried everything to pin it down to an IP, but M was all I could ever find. Another thing I remember is that I never liked the place. Not at all. There was nothing there. It was all empty. I remember being excited the first time we found it, because there was something hidden, and it felt like it was something somewhere where it shouldn't be. Then I hated it, because it was just empty, and it made me feel bad and empty. Not boredom, no. Like it wasn't supposed to be there or anywhere. That it wasn't a part of anything. I wrote Angelica back, telling her I wasn't interested in talking about that. I didn't hear from her that night. That was unusual. She normally replied right away. Eerily fast, I realized while mulling it over, it was like she had already had her answer typed out. But it didn't matter what I actually said to her. Now that I was waiting for a response because this whole thing had me inexplicably shaken up, of course, she didn't reply. The next day when I got home from work, an email was waiting. We were missing so much. The hole had so much for us to discover. So many secrets. You could keep going and going. It's like an endless puzzle. Everyone else stopped at the first layer. You remember that, right? I just knew there had to be something else in it. I knew no one else could create and hide it for no reason. I kept going back to it, looking closely until I discovered how to go deeper. And I kept going. It's still there, you know. It's not too late. The web ring is gone. Netscape is gone. But the hole is still out there, waiting for you. I felt a strange chill down my spine that I brushed off as nerves. I was up for promotion, and I was a little stressed, of course. I started to wonder if she might be pranking me. Angelica wasn't a very humorous girl, though she'd laugh at your jokes. But she didn't really make it her own, you know. She didn't really make her own. In fact, something about her earnestness was really disturbing. I didn't reply to her right then. No, I decided to run some checks on her because things weren't adding up. I started with the email address to see if she'd been posting anywhere. I was searching for a while before I hit something. I didn't find any forum posts or websites or anything like that. What I found was that her email host, Globetrotter, had stopped hosting 11 years ago. The email address she was writing from was impossible. Now I knew something was wrong with her, if it was really even Angelica. I mean, why would she go through so much trouble to create a fake email address that mirrored whatever email address she would have been using in the 90s? It wasn't just quaint anymore. Also, we hadn't talked in 18 years. Why did she suddenly want to reach out to me? And why? Just to talk about some long-forgotten website. Because I felt like that's what she was building all along. The more I thought about it, the more weird it seemed. I should have just ignored her and went on with my life. But I wanted to know what was going on. I kept digging around. I used her ICQ number, her name, the state I believe she lived in. The more I thought about it, the more weird it seemed. I should have just ignored her and went on with my life, but I wanted to know what was going on. I kept digging. I used her ICQ number, her name, the state I believe she lived in. I could find MySpace. It's like her presence on the internet was actually in the 90s, like she disappeared completely, waited in hiding for almost 20 years, then reappeared just to talk to me about an old website. The whole thing was so bizarre. I started having trouble sleeping. I was having nightmares about staring into a monitor, not able to move. There were computers all around me, and I was concerned about the beehive in the corner. After that, I went a week without sending her an email, or without her sending me one. I felt guilty about it, but I had every right. I just knew that I'd regret it if I sent her another email, and it seemed like she took the hint at first, until a new email came in. This one was short and to the point. I think I'm coming to the center. You could spend your whole life in here. I remember those words exactly. Oh yes, because whatever the hell they meant, the way she said to them, so real and urgent, was upsetting to me. I didn't dare answer her, no. Another week went by without a strange email. This one was a kind of different email that came. This one didn't even have an email address, no. That was spooky itself. It got worse. The text read, "Don't trust emails. Not from good place. Delete and forget." It wasn't signed. I figured it had to be Angelica. It just wasn't a style. Not long after, I received another email from Angelica with instructions of where to go looking. Thank you so much, Shaky Jake. I will ensure that Face Ring is purchased by Sunday. You have my thanks. Now, do not break the vibe. I'll continue the story. Just know that I am extremely thankful. You are a kind man. Not long after, I received another email from Angelica with instructions of where to go looking for the hole. A place on archive.org on their Wayback Machine still had the dot to click on. That was the only way in, she said. I had to be the dot. No, it had to be the dot. I thought about going to check it. I would have, except I was afraid of it. I couldn't remember what happened to me with that site, but I knew there was something bad about it. Oh yes, an ASMR bedtime story, my dear living dead girl. Enjoy. Another email came from the blank email address. In the body, there was a link to a Gopher site. Now, I hadn't seen a Gopher site in a good 15 years. I had to download an old browser just to access it. If you weren't on the internet back then, Gopher sites housed a bunch of text folders. You'd go to gopher://blah-blah.com. They were usually run by universities. This particular Gopher site had only a few files, all audio files. I listened to them all. They had different file names, but each audio was the same. The muffled sound of a boy saying, "Help me, please," over and over. I was shaking. I got the police involved this time. They thought I was being pranked. I asked if they could at least look into Angelica. I told them all I knew about her. The only thing I didn't tell them is that I thought I knew who the voice was. I know it's crazy, but the reason I didn't tell them is that I'm pretty sure it was my voice when I was a boy. I stopped receiving emails from Angelica and the blank address after that. I hoped it was over. I think a month passed before anything else happened. I got that promotion at work. Things were feeling normal. I told myself some secrets are best left secret. When I got a large manila envelope in the mail. No return address. I went against my gut and I opened it. Inside was a printout of all my correspondence with Angelica. All of it. Not just the new stuff, no. Emails I'd written to her back in the 90s. I took this stack of papers to the police. This was evidence, but they told me they still thought it was a sick prank. That struck me as odd. I asked them why sick, and that's when they told me that they actually never heard back from the local PD where Angelica begin, I decided to go looking for any contacts I could remember from the time when I was speaking to Angelica. Anyone who would have known both me and her. We had a few mutual contacts, mostly people from the web ring, but also people we introduced to each other. Just not many I remembered by their real names. Actually, there were none. There was one guy. He went by the handle Rapscallion412. He was an odd guy into hacking and anarchy, the good clean internet taboos we had back then. He'd been on the net forever, since the days of the bulletin board systems. That guy, if he was still around, he'd probably still be going by that username. So I got to searching. Not only could I not find any trace of Rapscallion42, I couldn't find any Rapscallion at all. He was all over the web in the day, so that in itself was weird. It was like somebody had scrubbed all traces of him. That's when I got the idea to dig out my old computer. The old 1997 HP running Windows 98. I'd stashed it in the basement since I went to college. It would have at least have all my old contacts stored just where I left them, if it would even load. I had to wait 5 minutes for it to boot up. Then I got the Ethernet cable plugged in. It was like it'd just been in sleep mode for 2 decades. And there they were, my desktop icons for IRC, ICQ, Netscape, and even Napster. Napster. I heard there was more music than the radio. I heard there was more to music than the radio from Napster. Some good old memories. I honestly wasn't sure that ICQ would load. I believe ICQ still exists in some form, but I just doubted that their servers would still accommodate the old software. One of the key features of ICQ that made it so ahead of its time, besides being the only instant messenger, was that it also allowed offline messaging. I mentioned that because not only did ICQ load, but it loaded with a message. That perturbed me a little because it's like it was just there waiting for me. Knowing I'd booted up, except for one detail. The message was dated from November 1999. It was from Angelica, so it had to have been sent the night before she disappeared. It just said, "Are you coming?" It sent a shiver down my spine. Where was she going? Could I have helped her if I'd seen it at the time? Why'd she act like I knew? Even weirder is that I'm sure I'd been on ICQ after November 1999. I'd say I used it up to 2001 or so. That's when I went to college. It's like the message got trapped in the server all that time, and I was only getting it now. I closed the message and looked for Rapscallion42. I was hoping just to find an email address on his ICQ info. I really didn't expect to see a green online icon beside his name, but that's what I got. That only added to how unsettled I was. I almost had to check to make sure it was really 2017. Anyway, I fired off a message to Rap saying, "Hey man, long time no speak. I didn't want to just start with business after all that time." I was relieved when he replied back with a friendly hello and asked me how I was doing. After exchanging pleasantries and catching up a little, I had to ask him why he was still using ICQ after all this time. He said it's because of Y2K. Y2K really happened. He said it just didn't happen the way everyone expected. It was way more insidious. We all thought computers would just stop working because they couldn't handle the millennium change. But it wasn't that they stopped working. Something inside, the connection of things, something bad. The old equipment would be fine as long as it didn't get patched, but everything made after December 31st, 1999 would be tainted. That's why he still used ICQ and never let go of his net zero dial-up connection. I hadn't heard a Y2K conspiracy theory in a very long time, so that was interesting. I chose to ignore it and asked him if he knew about Angelica going missing back in 99. He said he didn't. He figured she just dropped off the internet, but he said it's no coincidence that she went missing right at Y2K. A lot of strange things happened then. The world changed. Only a few people even noticed. Now, Rap was always a little on the fringe, but what he said and what he was saying was strangely upsetting. Maybe it was just hitting a little too close to home. If that last message really was sent November 1999, then he was right. She disappeared right before Y2K. Given his views, I went ahead and told Rap everything that happened. He believed me. That was a nice change in a way. It made it feel more real. I was shaking while typing. He told me the story reminded him of something he heard from an old friend just recently. There was this guy, Rockstar, or his closer friends, or to his closer friends, just Reggie, who used to frequent an internet forum on hacking and freaking back in mid-90s. This guy had a lot of friends there. He was well-spoken and clever enough to earn respect over time. And over time, as often as it happens, he just drifted away from the forum. His posts became less frequent as other aspects of his life preoccupied him, and soon enough he was gone. The forum strove for anonymity, so for whatever reasons, no one kept in contact with him. The forum's still there, Rap said, nowhere near what it used to be, but regulars like him are dedicated. A few months ago, after 20 years' absence, Reggie suddenly showed up on the forum again. His posts were polite, conversational, but they seemed off somehow. Like someone feigning familiarity. He was just trying so hard. It was weird, but they were happy he was alive and well. So they replied to him and brought him up to date. And without acknowledging anything they said, he started making post after post about how his life was revolutionized. He found a whole new frontier of hacking. The hacking music begins inside you, he said. And he wanted to show it to them. The forum folk were flabbergasted by his odd behavior, so they started interrogating him. He went silent for about a week, then sent one last message saying, "I love you guys so much," with a tiny URL link. Raz's friend thought it was all a joke and that Reggie was just leading the whole forum up to an epic rickroll. He didn't click it because he didn't need to hear any Astley, and he was busy with something else. He came back to the forum later and decided he was going to go ahead and click that link. Anyway, it could have been something legit. On a whim, he refreshed first to see if anyone replied saying what the link was. He sees a post in reply from a very trusted and respected member of the forum saying in all caps, "Do not click that link whatever you do, and that is not Reggie." For an old pro to use all caps, that was serious shit. Even I knew that, so that was enough to dissuade everyone from clicking. The fake Reggie deleted his account immediately. The forum moderator and the others tried to figure out who the guy was, but they had no luck. The guy who made the all-caps post explained that after he tried to safe browse the link with an old Linux box, and whatever was in there wrecked it, and that box had security out the wazoo, he couldn't explain it. Also, before the computer wiped out completely, he said he saw something. The regulars pressed him to say what it was, and he made them promise first that it stays with them. He said he saw a picture of his first daughter on the screen. She died 5 years ago. There were no pictures of her on the computer. Worse, he'd never seen that picture before. That, more than anything, convinced him to post the warning in all caps. Whatever it is, he said, it's evil. Rap added, if you've been on the internet long enough, you learn that there's evil out there. Not the child porn or the torture videos, no, there's something deeper. Something hidden in all the code and connections. Maybe it came from us at one point. He was giving me the creeps, so I tried to bring the subject back to Angelica. He said, "No, listen. Sometimes it tries to get out." That was enough. I told him he was freaking me out with that kind of talk, and I had enough to deal with. He said he didn't understand what I was talking about. He still reads my homepage all the time, and I've been doing great work exposing the evil. The thing is, I don't even have a homepage anymore. That was taken down in 2001. He insisted it was my Fortune City homepage. He's been reading my updates all these years. Even after we lost contact, he said. I sent him a link to prove to him that Fortune City doesn't even exist anymore. Rap went quiet for a few minutes. Then he said he was looking at the homepage at that moment. It was last updated a few days ago, and it was all about what they were talking about now and what was going to happen next. It's a doozy, he said, then immediately went offline. I sent him a message with my contact info and asked him to let me know if he was okay. I haven't heard from him since. I checked ICQ a few times and he's never been back online. I had to walk away from that computer. I felt like I was being watched or something. Every noise was freaking me out. After a sandwich and some tea, I went back to shut it down completely. That's when I noticed a folder on the desktop that stood out. For one, I never really kept folders on my desktop, and two, I didn't really remember this folder at all. It was called No Escape, which honestly sounds like a crappy Bible game. I never played those crappy Bible games. But something about that folder didn't seem right. I opened it. Inside it was all pictures and WAV files. My instinct told me to get out of there. One picture after another was just kids. Teens, boys and girls, sitting at their computers. None of them seemed aware that they were being photographed. The pics all seemed pointless. All I knew for sure is that I didn't take or download these pictures, ever. They were all time-stamped. 21st November, 1999. The WAV files were the sounds of typing, muttering, chairs moving, the sounds of people at the computer, the sounds of surveillance, until one of the files. It was a voice I'd never heard before. I know it, but I don't think anything could have made me forget that voice. It was a hollow, metallic voice, almost inhuman. The voice was male, and it whispered with a hiss. "You coming?" And its whispers sounded like flesh sizzling on an iron. Nothing of this earth should talk like that. What it said was the same thing as Angelica's message, also from 99. I shut down that computer and I left the house. I didn't even want to be in my own home. I just drove around for a while, thinking. Whatever was going on, it was really not good, yet I couldn't let it go. I felt drawn to something secret, and I wanted to figure it out for Angelica's sake too, if she was truly a victim. I decided to contact my buddy Ben. He's a real computer wizard, works IT at the University of Guelph. I know that may not sound like the most prestigious place to be, but they actively poached him. He's good. Anyway, I gave Ben an idea of what was going on, and asked if he could get a lock on the Gulf side for me. I also asked if he could safely do it, to see if there was anything to this whole side. He said that wouldn't be a problem. The next day he comes back to me with a question. Is this some sort of joke? I don't like wasting my time. I've never even seen Ben slightly irritated before, but he was mad. He told me when he traced the Gulf side, it turned out it was being hosted right there at the University of Guelph. But they didn't have a Gulf side, he said. Never have. I assured him if it was a joke, I wasn't in on it. So he said to try to find that server tower it was running on. If he could do that, he could read the logs, find out who set up the damn thing. While I was waiting for Ben to get back to me, I got a call from Detective Thorold. The police hadn't shown much interest in my case, but it happened to land in front of this guy. Thankfully, he said that the simple fact that Angelica had disappeared meant that there was the possibility a crime had taken place. I agreed. Because of that, he had done a little more work, and he felt I should know. He'd found Angelica. When he told me she was alive and well, I was thrilled. He said she voluntarily ran away from home and chose not to have contact with the family. She declined to say why, and he had no right to compel her to say otherwise. Legally, he was bound to protect her privacy. The point is, there was no crime. However, when he told her how it came to be that he went looking for her, she asked him if she could speak with me. He said he took the liberty of accepting for me and passed on a phone number. I thanked him heartily. It was the first big of good news, the first real break in this mess. As soon as I hung up with the detective, I called her. I was nervous. It had been so long, and I was excited to hear from her again. She answered quickly and asked if it was me. I told her yes, and I said it was nice to hear her voice after all this time. Then she said, without any pleasantries, "It wasn't me sending you the messages." I told her I figured out that much already. "I don't think you understand," she said. "I've never once in my life sent you any sort of communication. I don't know you at all." A part of me was screaming. She's lying. She sounded so certain it almost felt like I was drowning. But if she wasn't lying, a whole chunk of my youth was a lie. I told her all I knew about her personal things, and she said they were true. I told her I found her through a Wiccan homepage on Angel Fire, and I described the page to her in the web ring. She said she didn't make that thing, and I should never have gone there. "It's bad," she said. "And wouldn't elaborate. What do you mean? I asked. Then I told her all the details I knew of her personal life, about her likes and hopes and dreams and her family. She said it was all true, but whoever told me about it wasn't her. That's why she wanted to talk to me now, so I would know the truth. She remembered how it used to happen every now and then a long time ago. She would have people tell her they talked to her all night, but she knew she never spoke to them, and they'd tell her she was doing things she knew she'd never done. She was asleep or sometimes not even in town. Then they'd get weird or disappear. She remembered this one time she was doing her math homework and a random guy messaged her with a solution to the problem. She was terrified, but she asked him how he knew her math problem. Was he spying on her? And he told her no. She asked him for help. She didn't believe him, so he sent her a screenshot. The message was from a day ago, but she'd just gotten the homework that day. She said the worst it got was when she messaged a close friend of hers and she saw online on ICQ. A friend replied with, "Who's this?" She thought it was a joke, so she said something silly. She didn't remember what. A friend said she didn't think it was cool to be hacking Angelica's account, or if this was her brother, to knock it off. Angelica swore it was her, and her friend replied, I know you're not Angelica because Angelica's sitting right here with me. She knew this friend wouldn't joke like that. She didn't have the imagination for it. Whatever it was, her friend really believed she was in the room with her, but she wasn't. Her friend insisted she was there that night. She said Angelica was showing her her cool new homepage. The friendship fell apart after that because her friend got strange. That was the first she'd ever seen of the homepage, and she knew it was bad juju. I asked her if she had ever heard of the hole, and she went silent for so long. I thought we lost connection. She said she's still there. She just never expected to hear that again. There was a guy who used to harass her back when she was about 12 or 13 on IRCQ. He called himself Holy Moses. He started off nice and seemed to understand all her problems and to know what she was thinking. At 12, that felt romantic, but she noticed weird things, like he didn't seem to have any life or personality. At any time of the day, he was always online and active, but no one knew anything about him. One day, he started to tell her stranger things like, "Do you remember the 3 men dressed as bees at the Halloween party?" She didn't know what she was talking about. 8 years later, at a college Halloween party, she saw 3 men dressed as bees sitting in the corner of the room. They weren't doing anything, just sitting still and staring at the floor. Then they turned their eyes to her, and their eyes looked so black. She ran out of the party. Another time he told her, "You can drink and smoke, you know. You died in a car crash." It scared the life out of her. She briefly wondered if she was really a ghost, she said. When she told him to stop telling her things like that, he said there was a place she could go that was for special people only, and that she'd never need to go anywhere else. It was a place on the internet that was infinite in all directions. She said she remembered him saying that specifically, and everything she needed would be there. It was called the Hole, and she just had to send him a message with the letter M to get there. She actually tried to do it because things weren't going well for her, but she sent the letter N by accident because her hands were shaking. Holy Moses went offline, and she didn't see him after. Until 2010, when she got an email from the new commandments at holymoses.com saying, "You coming?" If anyone was impersonating her, she said that was most likely the person. At the time, she was so naive. Looking back on it now, talking to me, she said he was the creepiest person she'd ever encountered. Just thinking of him creeped her out, and made her afraid he'd sense it somehow and come for her. Oh, that thunder. She promised we'd never speak again and bid me a good life before hanging up. I was left reeling. Whatever she said meant that whoever I spoke to for years in my teens, I don't even know who that person is. It was all a lie. And why? What was so interesting about me? I wondered how much else in my life was trickery. But I couldn't dwell on it too much. Ben called me back. He said he'd managed to track the server to a storage room in the sub-basement below his office. He was aware of the basement, but it was abandoned years before he even started working there, due to ventilation and mold issues. It was full of old IT crap now, and some storage lockers. Someone had set up the server in a storage closet, and the closet itself was completely obscured by old computer equipment, probably for years. because that's why it was never found. And that meant the server had been running under their noses all this time. When he gets in, he sees an old desktop hooked up to a landline. Beside it, he saw a notepad with "Please stop" written on it. That alone made him want to get the hell out of there. The whole place was covered in thick dust too, and his allergies were acting up. Somehow the server was still running. He had to hook up a monitor and keyboard just to interact with it. One thing he said in passing really disturbed me. The ironic thing is, the server was built with an auto shutdown date, and the date was the same day I was there to shut it down. It's like it knew I was going to be there on that day. After he shut it down, he went and told his manager all about it. Just a fun IT anecdote. His manager told him that there was only one man who could have set that up. Back in the early 90s, he said a guy was working in the department, and they all called him Milky because his last name was Milk and he was really white. It was a little eccentric too. That had nothing to do with milk, but it just happened to be true. Then he had a burnout and he went even more eccentric. It started with him pounding his desk. The manager at the time asked him if he was okay. According to Ben's boss, he answered with, "There's no way out." Then he heard Milky say something like, "You think you exist, but you're just another part of it. Everything is just another puzzle. Do I exist?" This fellow was having a real crisis. After that, the rest of the department started getting nervous around Milky. You just got bad vibes around him, the manager said. It got worse. Every day around 3 p.m, Milky started standing in a dark corner of the office facing the wall. He'd mutter some things. The guys joked that he was at his prayers, but he'd always come away looking more upset than anything else. Once, a new guy asked him if he was a Muslim, and he replied with, "I'm sorry." The guy asked what he was sorry for. "It was telling me how your children die," he answered. Toward the end, before they fired him, he started telling them about he found a place on the internet that wasn't made by humans. The guys joked that it was Skynet, but he said it wasn't created by machines either. It was always there. The internet just found it by accident. It showed him things he couldn't unsee. Ben's boss even recalled that he started to tear up. Ben's boss told him it was sad to see such a smart guy clearly losing it. Even though Milky was never caught stealing anything, equipment disappeared during his shift. Probably the equipment that went into the server. When they fired him, he told them that the secret place got into his head, and he'd sometimes wake up in strange places and had no idea how he got there. They never saw him again after he left that day. Ben said after that story and that creepy gopher server, he straight up refused to look into the hole. I told him it really wasn't that bad to quit being a wimp. That's when he said he hadn't told me everything. The server had a link up through the phone line to a really old webcam, one of those low-res webcams where the image updates every 4 seconds or so. It'd been running non-stop since 1977. All of the saved images just show the front of someone's house. The same house back to 97. He sent me some of the photos because he knew what it was. It was my house. Why would this guy have been spying on you all those years ago, man? How did he even know you? It doesn't make any sense, and it honestly scares the shit out of me. And here's what I told him. The thing about that webcam is, I just bought this house 2 years ago. That camera was pointed here before I ever moved in. It was just an astronomically improbable coincidence. At least that's how it should be. But I didn't believe that's what it was, any more than he did. The next day, I was still reeling from my conversations with Ben and the real Angelica. I ran it over my head so many times, like maybe the police made a mistake, so of course I've never even spoken to this woman. She was the wrong Angelica. But no, I knew everything about her. Someone systematically deceived me for 2 years, and someone had been recording a house I was going to move into for 20 years. Someone had recorded me when I was a boy. What happened 20 years ago to cause all this? It was so insane. I started questioning everything. I felt like I was being watched constantly. I started to wonder if my mum remembered anything. She saw me more than anyone at the time, naturally, and so when I called her up, she said she was expecting me to call. I generally didn't call during the week, so I asked why. She said it was because of my little prank. I grew concerned immediately. I wasn't pranking anyone. So I tried to calmly ask her what the prank was. She said the two guys, they showed up with a note for me to let them in. They don't say or anything or do anything. They've just been sitting there with their chairs put together in a kitchen, looking at the floor. You don't recognize them at all? I asked her. She laughed and said no, but I think she was starting to realize I didn't know what was going on. They're dressed in bee costumes, she said, almost as an afterthought. I told her to calmly get out of the house and call the police because I didn't have anything to do with this. She said she was upstairs, she'd have to go past them to get out. I told her to keep me on the phone until she got out. I listened carefully. It seemed to be taking forever. Finally she said, they're gone. The front door was left open. I told her to call the police right away and check with me in a bit. While talking, I absent-mindedly walked from my office to my kitchen. My front door had also been left open. Not only was it locked just a moment ago, it seemed like such a coincidence. I closed the door and locked it. Then I looked all around the house with a kitchen knife in hand. I have a one-story basement, so it was easy enough to cover all the hiding places. Fortunately, there was nobody, so I tried to tell myself I just didn't close the door that night, until my neighbor came over and asked me if I was having a costume party. I said no. That's when he told me he saw two guys in a bee costume leaving my home. They just walked straight across the road and behind the neighbor's house into the woods. How can they even see in the woods at night? He asked. I picked up my mother, and when we went to the police station together, I figured this one would be the best in person. All these strange events barely seemed coherent, but I got the feeling it was all connected in some way. The police were baffled. They admitted someone was harassing me, but without more evidence, there was nothing they could do. When we were making the report, my mom told me she was thinking about something just after this happened, because it struck her as odd. Do you remember how you had this dial-up modem, and when you run it, you'd swear you could hear a little voice inside talking to you? The way she said it, like it was nothing, sent a shiver through me, because I didn't remember that at all. What? Was all I could say. This is what she said. Yes, you'd set to go, and all the beeps and pops, you'd say there was a little voice in there with a message. To me, it was a lot of crazy noise, but you made me get real close and listen. And you told me it was saying, everything is in here, abracadabra. Can't believe I even remembered that. I told her I couldn't remember that. Not at all. I told her that it sounded crazy, but she just gave me a blank stare. I thought she was concerned, so I started telling her about what was happening, the whole Angelica thing, so she'd understand. I was saying, you remember that girl I used to chat with online in the 1990s, Angelica? She kept giving me a blank stare, like she couldn't understand me, so I told her more. I met her on the web ring my Fortune City page was on, and she didn't remember my homepage at least. She shook her head. What she said next scared me in a way I'd never been scared before. She told me she got an internet connection after I left for college to email me, but before that, we'd never had the internet in our home. I said she must have gotten hit in the head because I remember distinctly all these experiences being online, building my homepage, IFNet, IRC, ICQ. All of that was when I was in high school. She flatly denied it. She said she remembered, though, that I used to tell her I'd found a way to get into the internet without a connection. I'd have to call some number with my modem, then I'd have to sit still in the screen for a few minutes, something like that. She always thought I was joking. Before Detective Theron came to get us, she looked into my eyes. You should be careful on that internet, you know, she said. A lot of bad things on there. She rose to shake the detective's hand, and I was grateful to get off the subject. The detective offered to have a friend in computer forensics take a look at some sites I'd reported, but he didn't have much hope. After I got home, I secured the house one more time. Then, I got to work. The best lead I had at this point was the Holy Moses character, so I downloaded MIRC to see if I could find him in his old haunts. It had been a long time since I used MIRC. I barely remembered how it worked, and there were so many channels on FNet. It would take forever, so I decided to focus on channels that would have been relevant to Angelica back in the day. I started asking in channels like Gothic Vampires if anyone knew of Holy Moses, or heard of him, but each time I mentioned him, the channel fell to almost complete silence. I didn't get a yes or a no, I got ignored. Sometimes users even started to leave the channel. I was about to give up and try another avenue, when I got a private message from you, 47284U. He or she, whoever it was, to be honest, they told me that I shouldn't be doing what I was doing. I asked him why. He said it doesn't come off well to them, whatever that means. He also said Holy Moses is just a bot. It's been around forever, never logs off, and is almost idling for days at a time. I told him if that was true, why was everyone so reluctant to talk about it? I didn't want to tell him Angelica's story. I just wanted to find out what he knew. He said the whole thing weirds people out because nobody knows who built Holy Moses. Nobody. Over decades, no one has ever claimed ownership, not even the trolls. Nobody knows where it came from, or why it's there. It doesn't do anything. It's just there, he said. That's the creepiest thing about it. Always just there. Legends had built up around Holy Moses, he said. Like it was a government supercomputer monitoring IRC, or it was KGB, or a ghost. A bot left running long after the owner had died and his bank account just kept paying the bills. But no one knows. It was just there. Users tried messaging it and it never responded. It never interacts in any channels. It offers no services. It has moments of apparent activity when it's no longer idle. But no one's been able to detect what it does during this time, except occasionally a change of channels seemingly at random. He said that there was only one time when it did anything substantial, as far as anyone knew. Once in over 2 decades, and that only made things weirder. I was typing out a message to ask this guy what he was, because he wasn't saying. But just then I heard a sound, like my front door slamming shut. I paused and listened carefully, trying not to even breathe. I didn't hear anything, so I rushed out the front door. Nobody was there, nothing was disturbed. The doors were all closed and locked. I chalked it up to the nerves and went back to my office. When I got back, the user had sent me a very strange message. Where'd you go? I hope nothing strange happened. That was a little eerie, but Alpha was focused on getting answers, so I ignored it and asked what it was that Holy Moses did. He said, fine, I'll tell you. And this is what happened. In 1999, at 5 a.m. CST on November 21st, Holy Moses joined the channel Ornithology and made a series of short statements. First, deceive them at 7 a.m., empty it at 9 a.m., abandon them at 6 p.m., turn back at 9 p.m., and have it your way just before midnight. It was then that it went offline until January 5th. Why, he asked, why be silent and useless for years? Do that and then never do anything after. Sometimes when he really thought about it, he said it gave him the serious heebie-jeebies. That was all that he knew. Or anyone knew, and he reiterated that I really should be looking into this and just drop it. I thanked him for his help. I remembered little more of what commands MIRC had after getting into the groove some. I tried a who is on Holy Moses, see if he was out there. He was. Or it was. It was on one channel only, still alive. It's been signed on for 16 days and idle for 3. Its IP was showing only the letter Y. I was thinking about going to the channel and messaging to see what would happen, but I suddenly got another message from that user. I told you to drop it! I know it was just text, but it freaked me out. I closed out of MIRC immediately and walked away. I figured it was just a nut trying to psych me out, but you know what? It worked. I continued to argue with my mother for the next few days about what she said, telling me she would confuse reality with a Lifetime movie. But she assured me there was no internet in her house while I lived there. She said I had my floppy disk that I'd take home with me, but that was it. We went on arguing for a while before it occurred to me, take home from where? She said she didn't know. I'd go out at times and I'd come home with discs. I had a Sterlite tub full of them in my closet. None of them were labeled, so she didn't know how I had any idea. So she didn't know how I'd gotten any of them. But I seemed to know. She remembered how I'd dive into my bin and dig around for all the black discs and pop up with just the one I wanted. Generally, she didn't intrude on my privacy. She said she just saw me do it several times. Of course, I didn't remember any floppy disks. Either my mother was becoming senile, or I was losing my mind. Both possibilities were upsetting. My mum's a really good person. She had a rough time since my dad died a few years ago, but she was super caring. She didn't like to see anyone hurt, and she could see I was truly upset. Not just trying to be right, so she gave me a big hug and told me I should ask Ricky. Ricky, I had thought of him. Ricky was an old high school buddy of mine. Well, we were friends from grade 2 until we left for college. We just drifted apart after. I had him friended on Facebook and we never talked. You know how it goes. She said when I'd go out to wherever I went, I usually had Ricky with me. We'd walk all the way across the bridge into town to pass our weekends. I decided to take her advice. I sent Ricky a message on Facebook. He wrote back really fast. I was surprised because I never see status updates or activity from him. I asked if he was free for a phone call, and I was scared about having another internet-only conversation. Frankly, Facebook said he was typing a reply for about 5 minutes without anything happening. I was wondering what the hell novel he was typing. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I know I never gave my number to Ricky, so there's no way it could be him, I thought. While I waited looking at my phone, Ricky started typing out periods over and over. I answered. The voice on the other end sort of sounded like Ricky, as much as I could remember. But he sounded like he was really far away on a beat up, cell phone. I don't know why, but it made me feel weird and uneasy. I said I think we had a bad connection. He said it's the best possible that he knows. I was about to ask what he knows when he said alt.rec.birdwatch and hung up. I got a message on Facebook saying, nice catching up. He wouldn't answer anything I said after that. I asked folks if Ricky was okay. Apparently he was in a car accident years back and was mostly bedridden. I made a note to try and visit him someday. Ladies and gents, this is where we will stop the tale because it goes on for quite a while.